This is a screenshot, so presumably this will be a useful teaching resource for you at some stage, part of your flexible learning resources armory. There we go. Okay, thanks, Daniela. All right, so we've had a couple of kind of expressions of what flexible learning is all about, and I think that's spot on. Now, we all, of course, have different conceptions of it, and they're all related to our different contexts, and that's important, because teaching and learning must always be, it is obviously broadly based in kind of knowledge structures, but it has to, certainly with vocational education, be quite context related. So your context is absolutely key. So why are we talking about flexible learning and flexible curriculum design? Well, as was aptly pointed out, our students are changing. Who are our students? Do we know who they are? Have we asked that question? We might know some of our students as individuals, but who are they really? Do we know? We have, and I've taken some of these shots, these are of UWC students. Do we know that some students have nowhere to sleep, that they have no place to live, that they may be squatting on a balcony in a res or in somebody else's space, under a blanket, the best they can do? Do we know that some of our students are in fact adults with families and children, and that they have huge commitments outside of their study areas? Do we know that our students are of all ranges and all ages and of all sorts of backgrounds and professional qualifications and informal and formal learning? Have we ever taken that into account in our curricula? So a whole range of questions about who are our students, and this is absolutely vital if we are to think about how we are going to be more responsive in our curriculum development. Our curricula can no longer just be offered as standalones. We are no longer a provision-led university. We are a demand-led university. And certainly our postgraduate qualifications are going to be more and more demand-led, which I'm not saying that we're going the neoliberal route and this is now all about making money, but that we do need to make our qualifications relevant, and we do need to know who our students are. Okay, so why? Because the changing profile of our students in higher education, and it's not just a local thing, it's globally. Higher education globally is becoming more and more responsive, looking at our flexible ways of doing things in order to account for the fact that our students are working. They are often have families. If they don't have their own children, they're looking after siblings or their parents. They have numerous other responsibilities, and the full-time student who comes in fresh from school, 17, 18, 19 years old, who can sit down in the lecture, be fully supported by mummy and daddy for 3 or 4 years, and has no other responsibilities, is virtually a myth these days. There are so few of those as to make it almost irrelevant, actually. As I said, policy is demanding that we start offering our programs more flexibly. So the white paper on post-school education and training is encouraging universities to be not only be flexible, but to offer open as well as distance learning. So as we will hear just now in the case study, we already have a couple of pilots of distance learning at CPUT, or one anyway. If we're going to talk about our postgraduate diplomas, many of our students will be professional people. They will have, if they haven't got undergraduate qualifications, they will certainly have specialist knowledge in the workplace, related to or not related to the qualification they want to study. But if they're going to be using this qualification for their practice, the qualification has to be practice related and has to be offered in a way that makes it accessible for them, as well as, of course, making it relevant for, as Marianne pointed out, that tension between the qualification that you need to progress professionally as well as progress academically if you wish to move on to masters. So a lot of the people will be coming from professional, from organizations, from working, and will want to come back into academia to move towards their masters. So how do we manage that tension? Also, ways of working have changed. So people don't necessarily work full-time anymore, as you well know. People are working part-time, they're working on contract, they're temporary, they're flexible, they're shift-oriented. So your students may be all of these as well, working peculiar hours. So we can't say, oh, well, we'll do part-time in the evening then to cater for the working students, because that's not going to help either. Many of them will be working shifts or be temp workers and working in call centres where you work through the night. That's not going to work. The other reason why, and a very important one, is in a digital world, our graduates need to be digitally literate and technologically adept. So if we are going to be preparing our students for the working world, for the world of work, to be competitive, to be able to problem solve, to be able to work independently and access information, they are going to need to be digitally literate, technologically literate. So working in a more blended fashion, working flexibly and using blended learning will prepare them for that. And also the one that I think as academics we find most uncomfortable is to acknowledge that there are shifts in the locus of knowledge production. Universities are no longer the privileged institutions that are the only locus of knowledge production and dissemination. That is happening in very many other places, including in the workplace and including in the web. And then finally, why? Well, can we afford not to? If we don't offer our programs more flexible, what is going to happen? Will we actually get the students we want? The NMC, the New Media, what's the C stand for again? New Media Consortium Horizon Support 2017. They do very interesting research, and the NMC Horizon Support 2017 is the most recent kind of evaluation that they have done of where we are moving, where we've come from digitally in education, where we are moving to. It's well worth reading. But one of the quotes that from that document is, "Online, mobile, and blended learning are foregone conclusions." Okay? If institutions do not already have robust strategies for integrating these now pervasive approaches, then they will simply not survive. So can we afford not to? I won't read that whole little paragraph out to you, but it is just to say that the affordances of using blended learning, of using technology, are huge. They have been shown to really enhance learning in quite profound ways by allowing learners to become more independent, by creating knowledge collaboratively, by requiring different ways of thinking. So it's not just how do we make it more flexible, but how do we use this technology to enhance learning for our students. All right, so then what do we mean by flexible curriculum design? It's not just about blended learning, so it's not just about the technology. All right? Or using Blackboard, although Blackboard is very useful. But you will find that in this case study that Blackboard is part of it, but there are other digital media are used as well. It's also not just about delivery. It's not just about when and where you deliver the course, although these are all part of it. So thinking about flexible learning and teaching, flexible curriculum design, is going to require a whole new way of thinking from COs. And I think one of the nice things they've got in the CHE document on distance learning, and I'll give that as a resource at the end that you can go and look up. But looking at this idea of what do we mean? What is this flexibility? Is there an end? And if we look at it along a continuum of, let's say, face-to-face versus distant education, look at the blue arrow, distance versus face-to-face. If we look at face-to-face, that's pretty much on campus or at learning venues, whereas your distance is very much more off campus, and we talk about the mixed mode in between. But in reality, actually, distance education is becoming more and more contact-based. So even though students are learning at a distance, UNISA is setting up more and more centres where learners come together and actually collaborate, or they come together on tutorials. So there's that face-to-face element is coming in, and also in face-to-face learning there is more and more blended learning coming in. So interestingly, these two, what used to be binaries or dichotomies, are moving together. They're becoming closer and closer together in the middle and more mixed mode. And this is really where your flexible learning sits. So if we look at the extent of ICT support for flexible learning and teaching, again, if we sort of comparing to the continuum above, We can talk about the old traditional way of face-to-face teaching and learning, which is no digital support, very much offline. Whereas at the other end of the spectrum, it'd be fully online, that would be your distance. And in between there are various degrees of internet support. So if we talk about a digitally supported course, it could be something that is offline still, but you could be using things like CDs or DVDs or digital resources that are handed out so that students can take away with them and that they don't need the internet for. And that's very important when we are thinking about who our learners are, who our students are. Do they have access to this internet? Do we need to support them digitally in other ways than via the internet? Okay, internet supported then in the middle. And then internet dependent. So internet supported would be where students to some degree use the internet in teaching and learning. It could be accessing Blackboard, it could be accessing resources on Blackboard, it could be going and doing a little bit of independent research themselves. Okay, it could be watching a couple of YouTube videos, but there would still be a lot of contact, and there would be other ways of learning and teaching as well, where there's probably more contact. Whereas an internet-dependent kind of course or program would be where the whole course is pretty much depends on access to the internet. So you can't really do the course without the internet, although there would be other modes, and then of course you're fully online. So you can think about your flexible learning and teaching and using or not using technology along these continuums. And if we plot those, and Marianne put up the slide just now as well, it's very useful to see perhaps if you plot these two as X and Y axes, it's quite interesting to see where you could put your courses or your programs on this particular grid, and then think to yourselves, how are we going to, or where do we want to go from here? So let's say your program is C, and if you look at C, you'll see it's big. It's much bigger than the others. So what you can also do is show the size of your program by the size of the circle. Okay? So the size of the circle depicts, if you like, the numbers of enrollments on your particular course. And where the size of your course, of course, or the size of your classes will make a huge difference in terms of how you decide to the activities you use, the kind of internet support you use, the kind of assessment, the kind of communication you have with your students. So all of those factors are very much dependent on class size as well. But this is a useful way of, as I say, plotting your program on this grid and then seeing where do you want to go. So let's say you're B at the bottom. Do you want to go more internet dependent, or do you want to go more remotely? Or perhaps you can do both. Perhaps you will have two streams. Perhaps you're splitting your course into two specializations. Perhaps there are some courses that are more elective that you can decide perhaps to offer more remotely, and others more internet dependent, and so on. So those are the different dimensions influencing your modes of provision. What are the implications then if we are going to go more flexible? Well, there really are four interrelated components when we talk about learning and teaching. It's not just about designing the pedagogy, the content, and the assessment. It's far more than that. It is, as Marianne mentioned, flexible admission. So these are students you're taking onto your postgraduate diplomas. They're not coming necessarily straight from an advanced diploma, or even from a BTEC, or even from a diploma. So what are they coming with? Many of them may need to come via RPL. Some of them might request credit accumulation and transfer, or just for their the courses that they've done to be recognized in some particular way. All right? And that would be perhaps including knowledge in the curriculum. Then there is the flexible curriculum design, which includes incorporating students' working and cultural knowledge, their specialist working and their cultural knowledge that could really enrich the course and could direct the course in some ways. Flexible forms of assessment, which take into account different learning styles and the contexts of students. So your students may not be able to come to fixed examination venues. How are you going to assess students perhaps in a more distance fashion? online or in other ways? And are there going to be exams? Why do you need to write exams? If this is a professional qualification, what is the point of an exam? So flexible ways of thinking about that. Flexible delivery, including distance, online, on campus, a mix of these modes, as well as accelerated or decelerated options. And if we talk about acceleration or deceleration, then that puts the cat amongst the pigeons with the admin kind of rules and regulations of the university. So how are we going to get around this? And what are we going to do about flexible support systems and services for students who are not necessarily going to be on campus, who are working at home at night? What do we need to put in place for them? How do we provide the same, not just the same access, but the same quality of services and support to our students who are learning more flexibly, and including those with disabilities, obviously. So all of these things need to be thought through. I will just move. This is a nice little diagram that you can look at in your leisure. I'm not going to go through that now. It supports everything we've been talking about. And just quickly, how are we going to go about this, though? And really, our starting point is to find out who our learners are and what their learning and support needs are. So who are they? What are their learning needs in terms of delivery, in terms of knowledge? What do they need to know? What do they want to know? Okay? How are we going to best support them? So flexibility must be built in from the start, and it is not an add-on. We don't design the program and then we think, okay, how are we going to, and I'll offer this flexibly. We start off from who are our learners, what do they need, how are we going to offer it to them, and that's where the flexibility starts with. You start collaborative conversations with your faculty, with industry, with graduates, with your current students. What do they need? Who are they? Who are they? Do you really know? Make it a collaborative endeavor. If we're going to build knowledge in the faculties, it's got to be collaborative. We can't do it on our own. And then once we kind of know who our students are, we start deciding on the exit level outcomes collaboratively and work backwards from these. The reason why I've put those in is because I've been working on some of the program accreditation with Marianne, and I can see that there's often a disjuncture between the exit level outcomes and perhaps the rest of the program, that it hasn't been thought through coherently and cohesively, which these level 8 qualifications are going to have to be done. They're going to have to. And then we take small steps towards fully flexible programs. Just the last thing. So, have you ever asked your students, what do you know about the topic and how would you like to share your knowledge? What do you want to learn on and from this course, and why? And then, how can we help you achieve this? And I think if we start with those questions, really seriously asking those questions, we can go a long way towards flexible curriculum design. Thanks. Do you want to move straight into the case study now? Shall we do that? We'll do that, and then we'll do the activity at the end. We'll leave that one out.